Ezekiel Marsh stood at the altar next to the heaviest woman he'd ever seen, knowing he'd just traded his dignity for a single cow. But when Adelaide Quinn locked the bedroom door that night, he realized he had no idea what he'd actually agreed to. The drought had been merciless. 3 months without a drop of rain, and Ezekiel's cattle had withered to nothing but skin stretched over bone before collapsing one by one into the dust. His ranch, once proud with 100 head of the finest cattle in the territory, now held nothing but cracked earth and the ghosts of broken dreams. The bank notice still sat crumpled in his pocket, a constant reminder that he had 30 days. 30 days before he lost everything his father had spent a lifetime building. That's when Cornelius Slade had made his offer. The saloon had been quieter than usual that evening. Men spoke in hushed tones, their eyes occasionally drifting toward Ezekiel sitting alone in the corner. Everyone knew his situation. Everyone knew the bank was coming for his land. Everyone knew he was drowning. Slade had walked over with that predatory smile of his, gold teeth glinting in the dim lamplight. He'd pulled up a chair without being invited and leaned in close enough that Ezekiel could smell the whiskey on his breath. "I hear you're in a bit of trouble, Marsh," Slade had said, his voice carrying just far enough that other men could hear. "I might have a solution for you, a way to save that ranch of yours." Ezekiel had kept his eyes on his empty glass, refusing to look at the man who owned half the territory. "I'm not interested in charity, Slade." "Good, because I'm not offering any." Slade had laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "I'm offering you a business arrangement. Marry my daughter Adelaide, and I'll give you the finest breeding cow in the territory. A Holstein. Fat, healthy, worth more than everything you currently own combined. She'd be the foundation for rebuilding your herd." The words had hung in the air like smoke. Ezekiel had finally looked up, searching Slade's face for the trap he knew had to be there. "Why would you do that?" "Because Adelaide is 26 years old and unmarried. She's not much to look at, Marsh. Let's be honest about that. But she's got a good heart, and you need cattle more than you need pride." Slade had leaned back, studying Ezekiel's face. "Besides, what choice do either of you have now?" Ezekiel had wanted to throw his glass at Slade's smug face. He'd wanted to walk out of that saloon with his head held high and find another way. But there was no other way. The drought had seen to that. Every rancher in 3 counties was struggling, and nobody had money to lend or cattle to spare. "She's willing," Ezekiel had asked quietly, feeling the weight of every eye in that saloon pressing down on him. Slade's smile had widened. "She knows her options, son. Just like you know yours." Now, standing in the small wooden church with its rough-hewn pews and simple cross, Ezekiel glanced sideways at the woman who was about to become his wife. Adelaide wore a simple brown dress that strained at every seam. Her dark hair had been pulled back so severely it looked painful. Her face was round and soft, her hands thick-fingered as they clutched a small bunch of wildflowers. But her eyes. There was something in her eyes that Ezekiel couldn't quite read. Not shame, not resignation, something sharper, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The preacher's words blurred together as Ezekiel found his mind drifting to the cow waiting in Slade's barn. He'd seen it yesterday. A beautiful Holstein with a sleek coat and intelligent eyes. Worth more than gold in a time when cattle were dying by the hundreds. With that cow, he could start over. He could rebuild what his father had created. He could save the land that bore his family name. All it would cost him was marrying a woman he didn't know. A woman nobody else wanted. "I do," Adelaide said when the preacher asked the question. Her voice came out stronger than Ezekiel had expected. Firm. Almost defiant. His own voice caught in his throat when it was his turn. The words felt like stones he was forcing past his teeth. "I do." The ring was too small for Adelaide's thick finger, but she forced it on anyway, her face showing no emotion as the metal bit into her flesh. When the preacher declared them man and wife, she turned and looked directly at Ezekiel for the first time all day. That strange look was still there in her eyes, but now it seemed almost amused. The reception was small and uncomfortable. Slade's hired hands ate quickly and left without ceremony. The few neighbors who had bothered to attend whispered among themselves, stealing glances at the unlikely couple. Ezekiel mechanically accepted congratulations that felt more like condolences. Each handshake, each forced smile, felt like another nail in the coffin of his dignity. As evening approached, Adelaide quietly gathered her few belongings. She had only a single worn carpet bag and a leather-bound book that she clutched tightly to her chest. When it was time to leave for Ezekiel's ranch, she climbed onto the wagon without assistance. Her weight made the springs groan in protest. The ride back to his ranch was silent except for the creak of wheels and the distant howl of coyotes. Ezekiel kept his hands tight on the reins, his mind circling the same thoughts over and over. The cow. The chance to start over. The price he'd just paid for survival. The woman sitting beside him, who he'd promised to honor and cherish until death. But when they reached his small cabin and Adelaide climbed down from the wagon, something in her posture changed. The submissive woman from the church was gone. She moved with purpose now, with direction, like someone who had just arrived exactly where they needed to be. She walked straight to the bedroom without a word. Ezekiel followed, uncertain what was expected of him on this strangest of wedding nights. And that's when he heard it, the click of a lock. Adelaide had locked the bedroom door from the inside, trapping them both in the small space. Ezekiel's hand froze on the handle as he turned to face her. The single candle on the nightstand cast dancing shadows across her face, making her expression unreadable. "What are you doing?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Adelaide didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the window and pulled the curtain shut, blocking out the pale moonlight. When she turned back to face him, everything about her had changed. Her posture, her expression, the way she held herself. The submissive bride was completely gone. "Sit down," she said firmly. Not a request, a command. Ezekiel felt a chill run down his spine despite the warm night air. "Adelaide, unlock that door right now." "My name isn't Adelaide." She walked to her carpet bag and pulled out a thick roll of papers tied with string. "And I'm not Cornelius Slade's daughter." The words hit Ezekiel like a physical blow. He sank onto the edge of the bed, his legs suddenly unsteady beneath him. "What are you talking about?" "My real name is Catherine Walsh." She began unrolling the papers on the small table beside the bed. "Adelaide Quinn died of fever 2 years ago. Slade needed someone to take her place for this marriage. Someone desperate enough to play the part convincingly." Ezekiel's mind was racing, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. "That's impossible. Why would you agree to something like that?" "Because Cornelius Slade owes me something far more valuable than a cow." Catherine's voice had turned to ice. "My father owned the water rights to Creek Canyon. Slade murdered him for them 3 years ago. Made it look like a riding accident. But I know the truth." The room seemed to spin around Ezekiel. He gripped the edge of the bed to steady himself. "You're lying. You have to be lying. I have the proof right here." She tapped the papers spread across the table. "Witnesses who saw Slade tamper with my father's saddle the morning he died. Bank records showing he forged the water rights transfer. Everything I need to destroy him." Ezekiel stood up slowly, his mind still struggling to process this revelation. "Then why marry me? Why go through with this elaborate charade?" "Because Slade is paranoid. He keeps armed guards around him constantly. He never goes anywhere alone, never lets his guard down." Catherine moved closer, her eyes intense and focused. "But tonight, thinking his problem daughter is safely married off and out of his hair, he'll be celebrating at Murphy's saloon, drinking, vulnerable for the first time in years." "Problem daughter?" Ezekiel repeated. "What does that mean?" Catherine's voice softened slightly, though her eyes remained hard. "The real Adelaide was going to expose him. She found out about my father's murder and threatened to go to the territorial marshal. Slade had her poisoned, made it look like fever, just like my father's death looked like an accident." Ezekiel felt sick. "And you think I'm going to help you kill him? I don't need your help killing him." Catherine reached into her carpet bag one more time and pulled out a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. I need your help making sure he pays for what he's done. For my father. For Adelaide. For everyone he's destroyed. The sight of that vial made Ezekiel's blood run cold. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about murder. Catherine, whatever you're planning. Justice, Ezekiel. I'm planning justice. She tucked the vial carefully into her dress pocket. Slade murdered 2 innocent people and stole everything my family owned. Tonight he pays. Ezekiel moved toward the locked door, his heart pounding. I won't be part of this madness. Unlock this door right now. You already are part of it. Catherine smiled, but there was no warmth in that expression. Only cold calculation. You're married to his daughter, remember? When they find his body tomorrow morning, you'll be the first person they suspect. After all, everyone in 3 counties knows how desperate you were. How far you'd go to save your ranch. The trap was perfect. Absolutely perfect. And Ezekiel finally understood why Catherine had looked so amused during the ceremony. She hadn't been marrying him. She'd been framing him, setting him up to take the fall for Cornelius Slade's murder. But what Catherine didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that Ezekiel Marsh had secrets of his own. And when she unlocked that door to leave on her mission of revenge, she was going to discover that her perfect plan had one fatal flaw. Ezekiel watched Catherine check the small vial one more time, her fingers steady despite the magnitude of what she was planning. She had no idea that he'd been expecting something like this. Not this exact scenario, perhaps, but something that would finally give him the opportunity he'd been waiting months to seize. You're making a mistake, Ezekiel said quietly, his voice carrying none of the panic Catherine probably expected. The only mistake I made was trusting that you'd understand. Catherine moved toward the door, key in hand. Stay here. When they come asking questions tomorrow, tell them your wife went to visit her father one last time before starting her new life with you. Play the confused, innocent husband. It shouldn't be hard. Catherine, wait. Ezekiel's voice was calm now, almost gentle. Before you go, there's something you should know about that vial. She froze, her hand on the key in the lock. Something in his tone made her turn around slowly. What about it? It's not poison. Ezekiel sat back down on the bed, his entire demeanor changing. He looked more relaxed now than he had all evening. It's colored water with a bit of salt to give it weight. The color drained from Catherine's face. Her hand trembled as she pulled the vial from her pocket, staring at it in disbelief. That's impossible. I bought this from the medicine man in Tombstone. He guaranteed it would kill a man in minutes. The medicine man works for me. Ezekiel smiled for the first time since the ceremony. Has for 6 months now, ever since I started tracking down everyone who wanted Cornelius Slade dead. Catherine's legs seemed to give out beneath her. She grabbed the edge of the table for support. You've been watching me. This whole time, you've been watching me. You're not the only person Slade has destroyed, Catherine. The difference is I've been patient. I've been planning. Ezekiel stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. That cow he gave me as your dowry? It belonged to my family before the drought. Slade bought my debt from the bank and foreclosed early, even though I still had time to pay. Then he had his men steal my cattle in the middle of the night. Every last head. Then why stop me? Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. Why not let me kill him if you want him dead too? Because hanging would be too quick, too merciful. Ezekiel walked to the window and looked out toward the distant lights of town. I want him to lose everything slowly, the way he made us lose everything. His land, his cattle, his reputation, his freedom. I want him to die a broken man in a prison cell, knowing that everyone sees him for what he really is. Catherine clutched the useless vial, her entire plan crumbling around her. The papers, the witnesses, they're real. I really do have evidence. I know. I've been collecting evidence against Slade for months. Your father's murder was just one crime in a long list. Ezekiel turned back to her. The territorial marshal is already on his way here. Should arrive tomorrow morning with federal warrants for Slade's arrest. Murder, fraud, theft, conspiracy. Enough charges to hang him 3 times over. You used me, Catherine whispered, her eyes filling with tears. We used each other. The difference is my plan doesn't end with either of us swinging from a rope. Ezekiel crossed the door and turned the key, unlocking it. Slade's reign ends tomorrow, but it ends legally, with justice, not revenge. Catherine sank into the chair, the weight of her failed revenge crushing down on her. She'd spent 2 years planning this moment. 2 years gathering evidence, assuming identities, sacrificing everything for one chance at making Slade pay for what he'd done. And now this stranger she'd married had stolen that chance from her. But as Ezekiel pulled the door open, the sound of horses approaching fast made them both freeze. Not 1 or 2 horses. Many horses, riding hard toward the cabin. "They're coming for us," Catherine breathed, her face going pale. Ezekiel's confidence vanished in an instant as he recognized the lead rider. Slade's men, armed and riding hard with torches blazing. Someone had betrayed them both, and now their carefully laid plans meant absolutely nothing. Tonight wasn't going to end with justice or revenge. Tonight was going to end with blood. The thunder of hooves grew louder as Ezekiel blew out the candle, plunging the bedroom into darkness. Through the window, he could see torches bobbing in the distance. At least 6 riders, maybe more, coming fast. Catherine grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into his flesh. "How did they know?" she whispered urgently. "How could they possibly know?" Ezekiel's mind raced through possibilities. Someone had told Slade about Catherine's real identity, about the fake marriage, about everything. But who? The medicine man was loyal, bought and paid for. The few people who knew about his investigation were trustworthy. Unless... The preacher, Ezekiel breathed. "Slade owns him. He must have sent word the moment we left the church." Catherine's grip tightened. "What do we do?" "The root cellar. It's hidden under the kitchen floorboards." Ezekiel grabbed his rifle from beside the bed, checking that it was loaded. "You take the evidence and hide there. No matter what happens, don't come out until morning." "What about you?" Catherine's voice shook. "I'm going to give them what they came for." Ezekiel checked his rifle one more time. 6 shots against at least 6 men. Not good odds, but he'd faced worse during the war. "They want to fight. They'll get one." "Ezekiel, those men will kill you." "Maybe. But if I run now, Slade wins everything." He looked at her in the darkness. "Your father stays dead and unavenged. My family's land stays stolen. Adelaide's murder goes unpunished. I won't let that happen." The horses were close enough now that they could hear Slade's voice shouting orders. Catherine kissed Ezekiel's cheek quickly, surprising them both, then slipped out of the bedroom toward the kitchen. Ezekiel waited until he heard the cellar door close before moving to the front window. Cornelius Slade sat on his horse in the yard, torch held high, his face twisted with rage. 5 armed men flanked him, rifles ready and gleaming in the firelight. But it was the 6th rider that made Ezekiel's heart sink. The territorial marshal himself. The man who was supposed to arrive tomorrow morning with federal warrants. The man who was supposed to arrest Slade. He was here now. And he was riding with Slade, not against him. Ezekiel stepped onto his porch, rifle lowered but ready. "Evening, Cornelius. Congratulations are in order, I suppose. Your daughter's quite something." Slade's laugh was ugly and harsh. "That fat cow isn't my daughter, and you know it. Where's Catherine Walsh?" "Never heard of her." Ezekiel kept his voice steady, though his mind was reeling. "My wife Adelaide went to bed early. Long day, you understand." "Stop playing games, Marsh." The marshal spurred his horse forward, his badge glinting in the torchlight. "We know Catherine Walsh killed the real Adelaide Quinn 2 years ago. We know she's been planning to murder Mr. Slade. And we know you've been helping her." The betrayal hit Ezekiel like a physical blow. The marshal wasn't coming to arrest Slade. He was working with him. Had been working with him all along. Every piece of evidence Ezekiel had gathered over the past 6 months. Every witness he'd found. Every careful plan he'd made. All of it had been reported directly to the man he was trying to destroy. "You're all on his payroll," Ezekiel said quietly, the pieces finally falling into place. "Smart man." Slade dismounted, pulling his own rifle, with practiced ease. "Did you really think you could outsmart me, Marsh? I've owned this territory for 20 years. I know about every move before it's made, every plan, every scheme, every desperate fool who thinks they can bring me down." But as Slade stepped closer, confident in his victory, torch held high and rifle ready, he made the same mistake he'd made with Catherine's father. He underestimated the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. Ezekiel raised his rifle, but he wasn't aiming at Slade. He was aiming at the torch in the man's hand. "You made one mistake, Cornelius," Ezekiel said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "What's that?" "You assumed I was planning to fight fair." Ezekiel fired. The torch exploded in a shower of sparks and flame. Burning oil splattered across Slade's shirt, sending him stumbling backward, beating frantically at the fire spreading across his chest. His horse reared in panic. In the chaos and darkness that followed, Ezekiel dove behind the water trough. The corrupt marshal shouted orders, but his voice was drowned out by another sound. The thunder of approaching horses. Different horses. Federal horses. The real territorial marshal arrived with 6 federal deputies, their badges gleaming in the moonlight. "Drop your weapons," Marshal Hayes commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority across the yard. "This is a federal investigation." The corrupt marshal who'd been working with Slade tried to run, but before he could spur his horse, Catherine stepped out of the cabin. She wasn't carrying evidence papers anymore. She was carrying a lantern, and she'd been using it to signal the approaching federal agents from the kitchen window. "Marshal Hayes," Catherine called out clearly, her voice strong and certain. "I have documented evidence of murder, theft, and corruption involving Cornelius Slade and Marshal Warren." Slade's hired men threw down their rifles immediately, realizing they'd been caught in a federal trap. The corrupt Marshal Warren reached for his gun in desperation, but Ezekiel was faster. His shot hit Warren's hand, sending the weapon flying into the darkness. The man screamed and clutched his bleeding hand. "Catherine Walsh has been working with federal investigators for 3 months, Marshal Hayes announced as his deputies surrounded Slade's men with rifles raised. "Every conversation, every bribe, every threat has been documented and witnessed." Slade, still smoldering from the burning oil, looked between Catherine and Ezekiel with dawning horror spreading across his face. This was all planned. From the beginning. "The marriage was real," Catherine said, walking to stand beside Ezekiel. Her voice was steady, but tears ran down her cheeks. "But Adelaide Quinn wasn't your daughter. She was my sister. When she discovered your crimes and threatened to expose you, you had her poisoned. I've been gathering evidence ever since, waiting for the right moment." Ezekiel stared at her. "Your sister. Adelaide was trying to help your family retain the water rights when she uncovered Slade's forgeries. She died protecting people she'd never met. She died protecting the truth," Catherine said quietly. "Tonight was justice for her, for your father, for my father, for everyone Slade destroyed over the years." Marshal Hayes slapped iron shackles on Slade's wrists with a satisfying click. "Cornelius Slade, you're under arrest for murder, fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Marshal Warren, you're under arrest for corruption, bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder." As the federal deputies led the prisoners away, their horses' hooves echoing in the night, Ezekiel and Catherine stood together in the yard. The ranch was still failing. The drought wasn't over, and they were still married to each other under circumstances neither had fully understood. But Cornelius Slade's 20-year reign of terror was finished. "What happens now?" Ezekiel asked quietly, watching the torches disappear into the distance. Catherine smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all day. "Now we rebuild. Together. The way Adelaide wanted. The way your father would have wanted." Ezekiel looked at the woman who'd married him for revenge and discovered something better. Sometimes the greatest treasures come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the worst situations lead to the best outcomes. The drought would end eventually. The ranch could be saved. And perhaps, in time, this marriage of convenience and deception might become something real. But that was a story for another day. If you enjoyed this story, Click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.